Welcome back to Car with a K, where we transport you to a world of education. It's Kate,
Ryan,
and Annika.
And today we're talking about something that hits close to home for all three of us. Being in a sorority, being a woman, and being constantly judged for how we choose to show up in the world.
Whether it's Rosie the Riveter or a modern-day Alpha Phi, society has always had a lot to say about women who take up space, and today we're going to be deep diving into that.
We'll talk about everything from internalized misogyny to feminist politics to how sororities connect to larger movements like various women groups, and even talk about Muholi, who is a visual activist.
We wanted to do a podcast because we think it is important to use our voice in raising awareness for this ongoing issue. One of the main goals we had for this was to clarify the modern-day feminist message that is often misinterpreted as anti-men rather than pro-equality. Feminist political philosophy, as outlined in the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, critically examines how political institutions, practices, and theories have historically marginalized women and reinforced gender hierarchies. It challenges the assumption that traditional political thought is gender neutral and reveals how systemic power dynamics have silenced or distorted women's collective voices. Women's groups have often been misunderstood as overly emotional, irrational, or fringe with their messages, and these have been dismissed as hostile or unnecessary. These misconceptions have been reinforced through media portrayals, political rhetoric, and academic framework that privileges the male perspective. To counter this, modern feminism must continue to emphasize that it is a movement grounded in the pursuit of equality for all genders, not in opposition to men. Clarifying this message requires inclusive dialogue, education, and visibility that highlights shared goals, representation, and mutual respect.
Throughout this semester, as we read through our course materials and engaged in class discussions, the three of us naturally began drawing connections between the feminist theories we were learning and our real-life experiences as women in a sorority. What stood out to us was just how many of these issues and themes, like gender expectations and internalized misogyny, directly reflected situations we've encountered throughout our time in Greek life. These weren't abstract ideas to us. They were real, tangible experiences we lived through. In so many of these readings, we saw ourselves. And yet, when it comes to the larger societal view, these kinds of conversations are often dismissed. Feminist discourse in the context of sorority life is rarely taken seriously. More often than not, we are reduced to stereotypes, like party girls, shallow, and not intellectually serious. For example, we pride ourselves on the fact that we have the second highest Panhellenic GPA of 3.7, which is also higher than the average student body GPA. The narrative completely overlooks the leadership roles we hold. The philanthropic work we do and the support system we build with each other. There's a lot more depth and intention behind what we do rather than people give us credit for. We felt it was important to hold space for that, to speak openly and honestly about how our experiences connect to bigger social issues. Because when feminism only focuses on what's considered serious or academic, it leaves out a whole world of nuanced, lived experiences. We wanted to use this project to shine light on that, to show that sorority women can be feminists, leaders, and change makers, and that our stories are not only valid, but necessary to understanding the full picture of gender dynamics in today's world.
It's important when covering this topic of conversation to think about the history and the historical context within this issue. When I was thinking about this topic, what first came to mind was situations like women's suffrage, women joining the military, and women unionization and things like shipyard and factory workers. And when looking in the past on that, there are clear, distinct moments where women were just not taken seriously and their message was over-sexualized and infantilized. The first one that came to mind was with the shipyard and factory workers. Many times women would riot and they would protest and they would not be taken seriously or heard. And the message only really became palatable to society and the masses and mainly men when the subject Rosie the Riveter was introduced. And she was this beautiful symbol of the message that these women were trying to share, but they only really cared about the topic once it was aesthetically pleasing that women were doing it under the guise of women who are protesting are like Rosie the Riveter. They're tough, they're attractive. And then once guys could see that, they were able to support the issue at hand. And this also is similar to when women wanted to join the military. They were told no. And for many times, women really struggled not being able to help out with the war efforts and having their loved ones, family members, husbands being sent off to war and not being able to support their country in the same way. And society told women, and the law told women, that they could not be in the military, and the only time that they could participate was to be a nurse. But to be a nurse, that meant dressing in a small outfit and being attractive, and oftentimes it was only attractive women who were allowed to be nurses, and that's all that the media portrayed. And so while it was a valiant effort for women to support their country and show their patriotism, it was kind of diluted into a sexualization of women and this new identity of them in the military. And then the final one that I really thought about was women's suffrage and how women were deemed as wanting to get attention and wanting to be a spectacle, and it was intimidating to men and they couldn't palate it. And those women who would participate in the strikes were not deemed to be wives and were not seen as fit women of the household. And I think all of this was around the time in which sororities were starting and are really important contextualization that Ryan's going to expand on.
Yes. And also I wanted to add that I think it's just kind of like tying it back to modern day, like when Kate was talking about the nurses and like that kind of being the only effort that was deemed acceptable to help out with war efforts. I feel like we still kind of see remnants of that sexualization in costumes and like women being like sexy nurses for Halloween, or like men kind of sexualizing that profession as a whole. And I just think that it's like so disappointing that even our like patriotic efforts are diminished and like belittled to something that is only appealing through the male gaze rather than something that is beneficial to society like it is. But going back to the contextualization of the history of Greek life and just women in sororities, Greek life has been a staple of American university culture for such a long time, but to this day, sororities in particular are frequently misunderstood. I feel like guys who are in frats are kind of seen as like cool and popular, but I feel like women are kind of just reduced to stereotypes. And popular media often reduces sorority women to shallow, appearance-focused cliques. But in reality, sororities have a very rich feminist history grounded in empowerment and leadership and service. The first sorority was formed in 1851 as a response to the exclusion of women from a male-dominated academic and social space. Early organizations like Alpha Delta Pi provided a community, academic support, and a political voice for women. Sororities not only helped women gain access to higher education, often as first-generation college students, but also positioned them to become active participants in suffrage, civil rights, and Title IX advocacy. Despite these contributions, public perception continues to be shaped by pop culture tropes and societal discomfort with women's collective power. The internal structure, philanthropic missions, and leadership development central to sororities are often overlooked, overshadowed by misconceptions of exclusivity or superficiality. When in reality, sororities are a champion of major causes from mental health to domestic violence prevention, while fostering professional growth and lifelong sisterhoods. Today's sororities are reclaiming their narrative by embracing intersectional feminism, promoting inclusion, and reaffirming their commitment to equality, education, and empowerment. Rather than being relics of past symbols of elitism, they are vital feminist institutions deserving recognition and re-examination.
Thank you, Ryan and Kate, for talking about that. I kind of want to switch gears here and talk about some of our personal experiences because I feel like it's really important to really shed light on the reality of our issue. So I'm going to talk about Pi Phi. So Pie Phi has become akin to both fun and controversy for us. We market it as a quirky, lighthearted fundraiser, but it also highlights the uncomfortable reality of how women in sororities are often sexualized and trivialized. The focus shifts, for example, from raising money for women's heart health to a spectacle, where we often become the entertainment at the expense of our own dignity. This duality reflects the complex and often contradictory experience of being a sorority woman. On one hand, we're committed to philanthropy and driven by a genuine desire to do good. On the other, though, we are frequently reduced to our appearance, pressured to conform to social expectations that undermine the very work we are trying to do. I remember during our most recent Pie Phi event, some of the guys made jokes about whipped cream on our faces, and it basically twisted an innocent and important fundraiser into something sexual. We were there to support a cause that we actually deeply care about, but instead we were objectified and dismissed. And ironically, these types of events are the events that actually raise the most money. We have more professional, serious philanthropy events like Alpha FIFA, which is a event where you can sign up to play and compete in a soccer tournament, but they often don't bring the same attention or donations. This leaves us in a tough position as we are wanting to be taken as serious and as smart and as capable women, but we feel like we have to play into stereotypes just to raise funds. I feel like this is a powerful example of how women's empowerment can be commodified and diluted, made more palatable for public consumption. Much like Rosie the Riveter's sanitized legacy or confrontational art challenges, we are constantly balancing authenticity with what society is willing to accept, and oftentimes that balancing act can feel exhausting. Do you maybe want to talk about your personal experience, Ryan?
I think one of the most notable things for me when thinking about personal experiences to tie into this was kind of the talk that was going around when recruitment for Greek life was happening. There was a lot of stereotypes kind of flying around from not only other women that were going through recruitment, but I think a lot of it was fueled by stuff that they had heard from men who were in Greek life. And there was a lot of negativity towards specific chapters on campus, specifically Alpha Phi, which we are all a part of. And there was just a lot of talk during recruitment, like Alpha Phi girls are stuck up, and just a lot of like negative connotation towards this chapter, which was completely contradictory to my experience talking to girls in the house and going through that entire process. I've found women who are extremely intelligent and have helped me so much. Like, you get to meet girls who are 2 to 3 years older than you, and I've met a lot of girls who are the same major as me, have the same life aspirations as me, and they've been able to help me a lot to transition into college and kind of get the feel of how things are supposed to go and what classes I should take and what internships I should try and get and stuff like that. Very, like, a lot of my experience here has been, like, helping me with my academics and building connections that will help pursue my career that I'm looking to build during this time. And I think that just this kind of negativity that was talked about during recruitment was very, like, negative on other women and kind of taking what is said through the grapevine, and honestly a lot from, like, the male perspective is just representative of how in society women are told, or like kind of pitted against one another and are put in this position where they have to tear other women down or feel that they have to tear other women down to be successful or to be viewed in a certain way. And I think that now that I'm in the sorority and I'm in Greek life and I've done all these amazing things and had so many amazing experiences and met so many amazing women, I really am able to take a step back and see how society negatively impacts even the smallest thing as rushing for Greek life at college. And that is completely representative of, on a smaller scale, of what happens in the real world. And I think there's a lot of negativity in the space of women's groups, and a lot of it is pitted against one another.
Ryan, building off what you said, I think it's important to acknowledge male-generated social phenomena that happens along a lot or on a lot of campuses, and especially at ours, which is kind of ranking the sorority houses and pitting women against one another to compete for which house is the best. And it ultimately is a system that does not benefit women whatsoever. I don't think any girl in any chapter wants to feel as though they're competing with other women around them to be deemed better than the other, but rather it's this patriarchal idea of wanting to seem the best for men. Like, we want to have socials with the quote-unquote top frat. We want to be the girls who are perceived as fun. We want to be the girls who are invited to things, and therefore we have to act in a way and conform to what we think the men around us are going to want, to then in turn have a sense of value. But no woman is creating these ideas, nor are any of them benefiting, and it's ultimately a system that just benefits men, as women are kind of almost coerced into acting in a way that they want us to act, if that makes sense.
And I think adding off of that too, like, I have so many friends in almost every sorority on campus, and not once when I'm with them or going to their events or supporting their philanthropy efforts, like, am I thinking about this ranking system that has been kind of obtained in the Greek life community. It's like, I love this woman, and yes, we're not in the same sorority, but like, I love her, she's my best friend. And I think that there's so much to say about, like, you can have this, like, sorority bond, but you also have just deep friendship bonds with girls in other sororities too, and it's nothing about what sorority's top or where we're at, like, or even have anything to do with men. It's just a lot of sisterhood across the Pan-Hellenic community.
And I think another downside of this system is that sisterhood is such an amazing, powerful, and bonding thing. And to not be able to have these relationships with the women around us really does harm us. And I think about all the intellectual tidbits and pieces of gold that I could have gotten from the girls around me that I feel alienated from. And it makes me really sad. And I just think of the kind of community that we would have had if this system wasn't in place, and all the ways that we could be more independent and confident and academic women. I just think we're stunted.
And again, going off of that, I think when we did talk about the history of sororities, this was an extremely academic group that came together, and it wasn't like one sorority was made for this, one sorority was made for that. They were all different groups made to create an academic space for all women, especially women who were probably getting an education for the first time, because the first sorority was made in the 1850s, and there was no competition. And I think that when sororities were extremely academic minded and the system wasn't set up, there was so much more opportunity, and we 100% still have that now. I think there's just more layers to the process and community of Greek life because of this male gaze that a lot of people try to live through.
And I think building off of that, each sorority has their own aspects that make them individual. Like, our philanthropy is heart health, but AKO's is building stronger women for domestic violence. And we're all doing the same thing to kind of not make right, but
build on, empower women in society through so many different ways. Like, we focus on heart health and medical research for women's heart health because it's an extremely important cause that doesn't get a lot of coverage. But as Annika said, like, Alpha Chi Omega's philanthropy is building stronger women and love shouldn't hurt, kind of empowering victims of domestic violence. And I know that Kappa Alpha Theta's is helping displaced children, and I feel like although we're all separate, all of our philanthropies are built towards empowering women in many different ways and coming through many different vessels in which women need to be uplifted.
I think also when we're talking about how we want sororities to be a place where the girls that are in each sorority feel as though it is, like, Greek life is a whole place where they can feel safe, it brings up the idea of rush and how alienating the rush process can seem to outsiders of the Greek life community. And even some people who are in Greek life feel as though their rush experience was very hard because there's a stigma and this, like, taboo and this false idea that in order to be in a sorority, you need to look a certain way, have a certain amount of money, have a certain social status, and a certain personality type. And if you don't have all of those, or at least some of those, you just simply don't have a place in sororities. I remember when I was talking to a friend, a guy friend, and he is from Utah and doesn't know anything about Greek life, has never heard of it and whatnot. And he said the only thing that he knew about sororities was Bama Rush, which I don't know if any of the listeners know what I'm talking about, but it's this hashtag or trend where girls who are predominantly in southern schools, southern big Greek life schools, document their rush experience, what they wear, their makeup, their hair, their jewelry, and then the houses that dropped them, the houses that kept them, their experience. And it really trivializes and honestly kind of simplifies and over-sexualizes the rush experience and the purpose, and just dilutes it into this social competition where the prettiest girls go viral for the most expensive outfit. I mean, there's even a subset of this trend where creators will go and add up the price of each girl's outfit, and it's honestly, it's crazy to see, and it makes people who might not come from a lot of money feel as though it's a world where they are totally not going to be a part of or not welcome, when that is not the case at all whatsoever, and really defeats the whole purpose of sororities in the first place and the founding ideas.
And I also think, going off of that as well, like, I feel like a lot of that social media, like, the outlet that social media has created for Greek life recruitment feels very performative. And I think, as someone who went through it myself, I think, like, for me, like, getting dressed up and finding a cute dress and all that stuff was so fun, and it just felt so sweet and nice. But then I feel like there's an aspect to it that is very performative of, like, women posting and people adding up their outfits, and it kind of alienates certain groups. But as someone who went through it, I feel like there's a very performative side and there's a very genuine side of, like, wanting to get dressed up and doing your makeup and meeting and talking to so many girls who you otherwise wouldn't have. But there's just that double side of, like, is this performative or is this genuine to enrich a college experience?
And I think that topic that Ryan just talked about was something that came to mind to me throughout our course when we were talking about Muholi and their new take and reaffirming of beauty through their more androgynous eyes and their still work pieces. And I just found it really inspiring, as so much of my value I felt like has been held in my beauty, and that said beauty is such a stereotypical and biased way of perceiving beauty, and Muholi's take was just so much more refreshing. I know Annika wants to expand on that a little bit more.
Yeah, thank you, Kate. So we talked about Muholi in class, but for the listeners who don't really know who they are, so Muholi was a photographer that that particularly in their series, Yes But Why, confronts the complexities of identity, visibility, and societal expectations. Muholi challenges the viewer to see beyond conventional narratives, presenting Black LGBTQIA+ individuals in a way that defies stereotypes. This mirrors experiences of women in sororities who often face judgment based on preconceived notions. Just as Muholi's subjects demand to be seen in their full authenticity, sorority members strive to be recognized for their multifaceted identities. Beyond the cliches of parties and social events, both contexts highlight the struggle against reductive perceptions and the importance of self-representation in reclaiming one's narrative.
When speaking of Muholi and the multifaceted identities that they bring into the spotlight with their work, it made me think of a case of globalism that really spoke out to me during our coursework and reminded me of something that I've kind of seen growing up, which is the issue of women in the Middle East seeking education. I know, first and foremost, that the Middle East is a tough area because it's so politically charged. And there's this idea that women, for instance, their hijab, that women should have to trade in things that make them themselves, that are inherent to their identities, that are important to their sense of self, to be seen as more professional. And also the idea that many people in the Middle East, like many women, face pressures to adopt Western models of empowerment, which can cause cultural tensions and resistance. So people view the hijab as an oppressive form of clothing that women are forced to wear, and it belittles their sense of self and their creative outlets, and that it is a way to oppress them, when for a lot of women it is a sense of pride and something that they feel excited to wear every day. And just because they're not in a business suit doesn't necessarily mean that they are not professional, that they should not be taken seriously, and that they need to conform to this Western ideal in order to seem like a true feminist or woke or on the cutting edge. And I don't think that's just the case in the hijab in the Middle East, but it could be cultural clothing. But another instance that I think this is important is when at like a talk or a business conference or anything, when a woman wears her culture's clothing, especially in America, it is seen as like this odd ethnic show. And people get so hung up on what she is wearing rather than the words coming out of her mouth, and think of it as this political statement or this thing to get a rise, when really it could just be an homage to where she comes from and her culture, and that who she is
like
is
her normal. Like, I feel like there's so much of that expectation of like a universal norm, and that just simply
in the Western lens.
That isn't a thing. Like, the universal norm is what, or a perceived universal norm is what is socially acceptable in the West, but that's not, there's no universal norm. I feel like there's so many different things and so many different cultures that are normal to them and very expressive of their history and their values, and just because that's not something that we see in the West, it is automatically different or weird or has some underlying connotation to it, when I think it's just normal. Like, it's their normal, and just because it's not ours, people kind of deem that as bad or other, which I know we talked a lot about in class, and I think that we kind of need to work towards diminishing the idea of other, because it just has such a negative connotation to it, when it just shouldn't, and it should be an embracement of all cultures and ideas.
I agree, and I think that the idea of the universal norm ties really well into the business sphere, and how women, in order to be seen as professional, have to kind of maybe wear like a business suit or a pantsuit or really tailored clothes, and pink is just unheard of.
Or even just wearing something that could be perceived as promiscuous or
or a dress,
unprofessional. Like, that is deemed unprofessional or promiscuous or unacceptable because of a male gaze or because of
the male norm,
when that is just not the case at all.
Yeah, and I think we are making strides as a society against that. And two instances that really spoke out to me when thinking about this topic that I think are really cool was Harvard inviting both Kim Kardashian and Alex Earle to speak to their classes about their businesses and their business empires. Both of the girls, the women, are viewed as promiscuous, a little bit ditzy. They're known in a lot of people's minds for their bodies. They're often like, they like to dress in a little bit more scantily clad and have flourishing social lives. But they're also absolute geniuses and have built empires in both of their spheres and have so much to share and to show about being a woman in today's society and how to capitalize on the issues that are in place. And they've done it very, very well. And I think Harvard giving them a spot to show this is showing that there is a little bit of a turn in what we are viewing as professional.
And allowing these women to come into their business schools and their classes and speak about how they are successful and how they got to where they are is very empowering to the students in those classes, and kind of gives like a real life experience and a very like firsthand idea of how these things can happen. And it's not all just, you know, you get lucky or this and that. It's like very hard work. And I feel like especially as a woman in the business field, you kind of have to like, give yourself this space to be successful and be quote unquote out there and do stuff that's, you know, different or quote unquote different.
I think it was so cool that Alex Earl was given high accolades for this trip and like was deemed as very respectable and professional, all while wearing like a baby pink jumpsuit. So, yeah, I think that's super cool.
And it was very like a subtle way of throwing her femininity into her business success and her success in the real world. She's very successful on TikTok, but like I think people overlook the fact that like she is successful on TikTok because she is successful in the business sphere and is very intelligent with how she markets herself and the deals she takes versus the one she doesn't, like how she does all of that.
Yeah.
And I think it's also important too to touch on Kim Kardashian, because I think she became popular in a space of like she's this ditzy party girl who kind of had a scandal that got her famous and got her family famous. But I think that it's just a note, like it kind of just highlights how we have to conform and do these things to make ourselves successful. But then once she had that fame and she had that space to do that, she just took off in such a different way. Like she's a lawyer in California and there's so much of a deeper level to her that I feel like is very overlooked because of how she had to get there. Yeah. And I think that's very, very relatable to many other people and many other stories.
Yep, and even Muholi's push for the observation of multifaceted people.
Yes, exactly.
Like that's a great case of it. I wonder if they would be friends.
Yeah.
Well, this was a great chat. Thank you so much for listening. I love talking with these girls and I learned so much, and I hope that you learned something from this podcast as well.
Yeah, thank you so much, Kate. Like, it's been great.
I think it was really good to just kind of all get together and reflect on our experiences and the different facets of the outside world that are very intertwined into our life that we may not have recognized without the different readings and education we got through this class and just being women in today's society.
Yes, I love this class. And thank you guys so much for listening. I hope you tune in next time to KAR, K-A-R, for your next trip into the academic sphere. So,
see you.
Bye, guys.